September 24th, 2018. I'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we've got three items on the agenda for this evening. Schools and Dr. Baeta are first.
First and only.
How are you?
First and only. I'm here for a couple of items that I want to distribute to you. And I know you also, I believe, have my memo as it pertains to the town meeting. Just a couple of general pieces of information that I think would be important. We have our annual, I would call our annual personnel information.
Thank you.
That I would call fake news. I'd like to go through this for the public record if that's possible. I did it with the school committee on Thursday as well. Before you, what you have is a list of all of our staffing. Based upon my office for the changes that are made. As we know, every year the school department, the ins and outs, lead to a lot of questions about how many new positions do we have and new people. So I wanted to make sure that you had that. I did it by name, resignation, hire date, and/or resignation date, including retirees. And more importantly, positions that we didn't fill that are causing some impact. You'll see the positions not filled are in red, including an entire food services department. Our total FTEs for folks that went through that process of position not being filled, resigning, retiring, leaving, or elimination of the department is on the back of the second page. Or the first page, I should say, where you have the educational not filled of 9.36 positions, other not filled at 18.8 for a total of 28.16. On the second page, you'll see that there's another position not filled under paraprofessionals. You'll also notice that we tried, and I use the word tried, to not have any cost to the town side for healthcare costs on some of the new employees as paraprofessionals. So on that second page, you'll see that we are, as of noon today, positions not filled for para were 0.5. As of 3:30 this afternoon, we are now negative 0.5. In other words, I have to hire a one-to-one paraprofessional effective next week for a student. That's a special education requirement. I have an IEP situation which will require us to move to a one-to-one position. Those funds will come out of the tuition line item funds that we left in the budget as part of our final budget approval. Concerns, grade 2 at both the LGN and the JCS, the cut in the grade 1 teacher position has created class sizes of 24, 25, and 26 at both of the elementary schools in grade 2. Second concerns is Norton High School. I said to my administrative team this morning, my central office team, my biggest concern was that for 3 years I created 0.5 positions and 0.6 positions and 0.8 positions to deal with class size. It took one vote in May for us to eliminate all of that. All those positions have been eliminated as part of our budget cuts. You'll see those as a 0.6 not filled in math, 0.5 not filled in English. At the top stuff, we also cut back on certain teachers at the elementary level from full-time to 0.91. We did call back 2 people. I would like to take you through that story. The first was that we had a teacher, Elizabeth Falvey, who was in the budget. We left it because on the LGN side of town, we typically see an increase in enrollment in the middle of the summertime. Those class sizes are at 18 to 20. They would have been at 24 to 26. And for kindergarten, we just don't think that's appropriate. So we left that position in our final budget as approved by you folks, town meeting, and then the school committee. And then the second was Sarah Lyons was called back in grade 1. Reassignment, that funding came from an internal teacher who moved to the preschool tuition program. We now have 99 students in that program. So we utilize the funding, not in the operational budget, but in that revolving account, to bring that person back so that we could recall that teacher back into that slot. So both of those two positions are not are not part of any increase to those line items. As you go down below, leave of absences, in some cases we have to replace them. In one case, we cut English services at the middle school. We have less support in English this year by cutting that full-time position. There is an increase in the wellness teacher of 0.2. That's recorded under a teacher as well. And then on the reverse page, if you flip over, you'll go to all of the FTE decreases, which all have impact of less classes being offered at either the JCS middle school, the Hay, or the Spanish at the middle school as well. And then the elimination of food services, with one person who was a .8 administrative assistant in the union, moving from the secretary's union, administrative assistant's union, which was moved into the high school, which actually in the prior page shows you that that person was let go at the high school. That's a bumping within the same administrative positions. 11 of the food services employees have in fact filed to be Chartwell employees, which is the private firm that won the bid. They are currently unionizing. They have the right under the law that if 50% of them become employed by Chartwells, that they can file to become a union again, and they are currently negotiating with Chartwells as Chartwell employees to do that. So that's the overall, with one change at the last minute, which was the special education change from earlier today. Next month, after October 1st, I'll send you class sizes in terms of specifically the high school, because that's where we have our final numbers. But you're going to see some significant increases in class sizes of 28 to 30 that were actually down to 24 to 26.
So I have one question about the not filled. That means that you can't fill that position.
I don't have the financials, correct?
Right, okay.
Yep.
It's not like it's open and nobody applied for it. It's
No,
you can't-
these are financial cuts.
Financial cuts, so that's what that means, okay. I just want to make
Yep,
clear, okay.
yes.
Of the 18.8 people from the food service moved, you said 11 of them moved over?
They have been hired by Chartwells, correct.
What about the other 7.8 people?
Retirement, unemployed. Those would be the two
Do you know
situation.
if he retired?
I don't have the form in front of me, but I believe it's either 3 or 4. And I did do a double check of unemployment. When did I come up? I came up to grab a form, you were out, and I got to talk to the town accountant, got a copy, just to verify that those people should be receiving unemployment.
I'm glad most of them got hired.
Okay? So if you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out. I'd be more than willing to give you some more backup information if needed. This one is
I do have one question. It actually goes back probably a couple months in an email, and I was trying to get my hands around it. It was about full-time teachers and floating, that you had the latitude to have a position where you almost were just looking and projecting in the future
correct.
with the position and where you would place that FTE at which school.
Right.
Could you elaborate?
So that's the kindergarten position at the LGN. That's the final position that we ended up as a floating position within the approved budget. And we did that based on the recommendation of, typically every year, the LGN side of town, we see 20, 30 students register. And lo and behold, by the last week of school, we were seeing class sizes of 25 and 26. So instead of allowing for the person to go for unemployment, we recalled the person back at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the last day of school,
And
22nd of June.
is that something that's standard practice that you kind of,
For kindergarten, we've tried to do it that way, but we've also had it, we've had a couple of floating positions since I've been here in special education. I know that. Just worried about where the students were coming from. But in general education, it was kindergarten. And I think it's been the last 2 years that we've kept a floating position if needed, without causing a new position.
right, and you could take that position if the demand was high enough in the high school?
Yes, correct. Yep. So yes, we have to take that position as a floating position for what we would call the priority placement.
So it's a budgeted position.
It's a totally, yeah, it's a budget position within our budget. Okay. The good news is before you is also is the the advanced placement program. I wanted to bring this to you because I think it's an opportunity for you to see some of the good things that we've been doing. We had 186 students at Norton High School this past year take 321 AP exams. 68% of the students were 3 or better. 35% of the students achieved a 405. If you don't know anything about the AP, it's about 3, 4, or 5 on a 1 to 5 scale. That's when colleges really take a look at your scores. But I wanted to note a couple of different things that I thought were important. Number one, the AP Lit. We ran 2 sections of AP Lit with 47 students. We had 27 of whom received qualifying scores this past year because of enrollment. Again, this is how you end up with a schedule at the high school. Kids have to, unfortunately, make decisions, and we have to make decisions based upon how many classes we can run. We had 24 enrolled. They all took the exam, with 50% of them receiving qualifying scores, 20% of these 24 students receiving scores of 4 and 5. AP Calculus, again, improvements. I just wanted to quickly go through this. You look at the sciences, which is an area we're very proud of. We've always done well. Biology had a passing rate of 89%. That's a 3, 4, or 5 score. The national average was 61%. So it speaks volumes, I think, to our students. The chemistry, the national average was 2.76. Our average was 3. Again, 3, 4, 5 passing. And then social studies, 43 of 58 students received a 3, 4, 5, or 74%. The global average for qualifying scores was 52%. AP Psychology, 66 test takers out of 83 received a qualifying score of 3, 4, 5. And then AP European, 4 of 13 students received a qualifying score for 30%, which was the first time we'd run that course in a while. So just wanted to share that information. We'll do some press releases with that in the coming weeks as well. And then 2 other pieces of information that I was asked by the school committee to forward to you, which they received on Thursday as well. And it has to do with some comparables. If you go on our district website, we have a ClearGov program on a section of our webpage called the Transparency Center. The Transparency Center for us is Department of Revenue, Department of Elementary Secondary Education, audited financials. And I'm sharing this with you because these are the communities that we're usually financially compared to and things are looked at. And I wanted to just, for the sake of looking at our comparisons, just look at Norton, Easton, Foxborough, Mansfield, just not only from the number of students, but as you can see as a percentage of our budgets, where the funding comes from in terms of state aid versus municipal aid, revolving accounts, and just continue to be mindful that school choice funds are not part of net school spending. They are funding that's under the school committee's guide, and I know that's always controversial for people to talk about. But for us, that's the reason why 1,700 of students, paid for by 91 students last year, are able to have one-to-one devices. Without them, I think you all know that our budget would not be able to handle that amount of money without just making more personnel cuts. And I think that's important to recognize when you look at the dynamics of what that's done for us as a school community in trying to make decisions. I think the biggest issue going forward with these types of information has to do with when do you take a look at school choice and class sizes and say, well, you no longer can bring in any revenue because your class sizes are getting too high, and that'll be another discussion that will happen this spring when the school committee takes on what our budget looks like and where these things should come from in terms to be able to pay them. They're not free. They're not part of our operational budget that's presented to you in terms of the actual one-to-one devices. This year, we're also taking out $90,000 for curriculum that came from those funds because we absorbed those as parts of cuts. And again, you can go right on our web page and receive that information. And you can look at any other community that you think is a comparable community. The last page is, when you're looking at comparisons, is we took the same 4 communities and we looked at the fees, everybody's favorites. This is maybe a proud moment, I guess. It's always nice to come out on top, be number one in the amount of fees that are charged to parents. For the purposes of our biggest issue, which is transportation, and then our other issue, which is in terms of the overall general costs that we have placing on parents. And you'll look again, Norton, Easton, Mansfield, Foxborough, the typical comparable districts for us in terms of size, but also outcomes. Out of these 4 districts, we have the second highest placement for college placement in 2- and 4-year colleges. Our AP scores are better. Our SAT scores are within 100. And in general, as you can see by some of the expenditures, what's happened in the last few years and since 2007 is that one of these communities has absolutely no fees whatsoever, and the other communities have actual caps on fees, which is just another way for us to find money somewhere else if we were to do that. We are still charging $350 for transportation and $350 for every season of every sport. As you know, we tried to eliminate some of this in the past, and it just hasn't worked out. The biggest component for me is we're absorbing every increase in athletics and every increase in transportation in the operating budget. So if your fees are staying at $350 from this year to next year, you're still going up 3, 4, 5% in line items in terms of everything from insurance to the bus to take the kids for sports to the cost for referees goes up $1 or $2 every single, because I'm on one of those committees for MIAA. So in the case of transportation, you're absorbing $80,000 and you're not getting necessarily a dime more in fees. Same thing with athletics. You're going up $35,000 to $40,000. You're not absorbing any more in fees. This was the issue that I said a few years ago was going to eventually come full circle, because when you start to take out over $100,000 in operation funds every single year, but your fees are here, unless you have all these new students that are playing on sports, which we don't, or you have an increase in free and reduced lunch, which we do, you actually see your funds going the other way for 2 reasons. 1, because the expenses have gone up, and 2, because less students are actually able to pay the full fee to participate. In the case of transportation, the rules is that if they're on free and reduced lunch, they have to be provided that at no fee. But for the athletics, we continue to charge them at a different rate. Michael just gave me the, if I'm reading this right, Mike, correct me, the Division of Unemployment statistic for 8/30 through 9/20 was $22,521 in unemployment, which is going to be lined up, I think, to the town side. Thank you, to the school side. And most of that, Tom, to answer your questions, are in the food services, because we did have folks who got picked up, because I had to do the fingerprinting sign off for a teacher who was with us and fingerprinted with approval. Instead of going back and paying another $50, what I can do is I can sign on their behalf that in fact their fingerprinting was fine and they got jobs in other districts. Just wanted to share one more piece of information that I think is important for all of this, and that is what our requests are for the fall town meeting. We just came out of Capitol where we had to make a change, and we went for what I would call a combination of emergency funding as well as in 2 areas. One is we've requested that the Capital Committee consider a new hot water pipe on the first floor of the LGN, because the joints are literally falling apart. That's up to $55,000 request. And the second, which we didn't anticipate doing 2.5 to 3 weeks ago. And then the second request we prioritize, which is our software backup system for up to $60,000. And that's really just, we have no backup if that system goes down. So you can't even build stuff if you can't actually find the information. That's student information and personnel. So those are our 2 major ones. Everything else we've basically have moved to discussions down the road or into the spring town meeting. Yep.
As I say, at the LG, is that a forced hot water or a steam system?
That's a forced hot water.
Forced hot water?
Yeah. And I'd like to introduce, too, the new guy who took over for Link is Matt Wells. Matt is in the back. So he's, I guess you could say he's the new Link, but he's really not. It's Link's inside joke. But we welcome him. He's coming from Northborough, Southborough Public Schools.
So that would just be a pipe replacement?
Yeah, so that's a pipe, that's a full pipe replacement and the concrete. Because remember, it's on the floor of the main hallway going towards the back of the building. So we'll be replacing that and putting it up top
Yep.
with the right insulation on it, so if there's an issue, it'll catch it through the insulation, so I found out. But the idea is it no longer would be underneath the building because it's leaking into underneath the building currently.
Let's make sure
And
it's
we know that the,
gravity fed.
yes, yes. So the article for town meeting is for 465, 830,000. The chunk of that is really broken up into two parts, or three parts. I want you to think about the third and fourth line items as an opportunity to improve student achievement in order to take care of some long-term costs. I want you to think of the first one, the 281,440, that's total materials and supplies. So we just went through the third year of cutting materials and supplies. As you know, thanks to you, you gave us $100,000 last year, and then thanks to me, you knew I withheld that money in November when I found out that our special education was in trouble. So we really did not backfill that situation at all, except for copy paper, which is just because at the end of the year, it's easy for us to do. But in terms of everything from, you know, the stuff that's used in labs and science or any of that, we are down to literally the little bits where we're sharing, or if you ask my middle school and my high school science teachers, where they're not able to do certain labs. That just came to me last week, where a middle school teacher said, we don't have that material. So that's a really important piece of our needing to run. There's no backfilling of positions here. There's no one getting another job. There's nobody getting more FTE. This is straight materials and supplies that we would request that you consider. The second one is the interactive projectors for 33 classrooms. This is kind of a quirky one because this is a curriculum issue. We have our interactive projectors are aligned, especially at the elementary level in K to 3. They're fully aligned with our curriculum. If that interactive board isn't working, our curriculum, the way we're supposed to be teaching with students and interacting students, isn't working. So that's a cost of approximately $3,000 a piece for 33 classrooms in K through, I believe it's 3, 5, and the middle school. And that's because our curriculums are all tied into interactive projectors and how they work with teaching in the classroom. So students are able to come up, interact, the teacher interacts with the students as well, and their actually one-to-ones are also aligned to some of that, depending if we have the software online.
I know you have written capital next to it. It doesn't
Well,
quite capital on.
Well, the last projectors that we put in, and I'll defer to Mike, the last projectors that I asked for was my first year here, and I believe they went into operating, not capital.
I think it's because of the dollar value per unit.
I didn't hear you, Tom.
Is it the dollar value per unit, why we can't capitalize it? Because they're only $3,000 a piece.
Well, I would think it would be a capital item because it's one project, so we would add it to the
So
capital.
Okay.
that would be a smart thing to do.
Yeah, I went off the idea that it was $3,000 a unit, and,
I did the same thing when I did the math, and you said 3,000.
right.
So it could move out of this
Cap.
460.
Yeah, this could be moved back, and I'll send Mike a memo tomorrow requesting that it be considered by capital.
And how old are these?
I'll defer, Karen, Paul.
Most of our projectors are in the 6 to 8 year range.
Right.
We've gotten pretty good life out of them.
Yeah.
And we're pretty diligent about making sure that we're turning them off and turning them on and all of that stuff to save. I wouldn't be asking for this if it wasn't to tie into the curriculum that I learned more about, and specifically Karen, who has said there's an equity issue here. If 3 of the projectors in grade 3 in one building are working, but the other 3 in the other grade aren't working, I got a problem, because I have an equity issue. And these things can go at any point. I will tell you that this summer, the leadership retreat was at the library. And if you know the library at the high school hall, you walk in and there's the librarian office. And we're right at those tables right there, and we're being presented something, and the projector just went dead. So then we took the projector from the other side of the room, and our IT, we got a 10-minute break, had coffee, and Nikki came over and put the new, and that one went dead about 5.5 minutes later, literally just like that. I have people here that were in the room when that happened. The next one is asking you to think differently. I am very concerned with the continuation of what I see in the area of literacy and students. And what I would like to do is proactively extend the school day for students with the parent recognizing that their child would stay longer school day. This would be targeted assistance of anywhere between 120 and 180 minutes a week of literacy in small groups, 3 to 1, or even 1 to 1, as a way to try to target our students before there's discussion of needing further interventions and potentially an IEP down the road. This is something that we think is an aggressive approach. We already know what some of these students are dealing with in terms of their literacy. They're behind, and we're trying to figure out a way to be proactive in supporting reading for these students. To go with that along, yes, Paul?
This is for students that you identified as needing special additional help, or is it for everybody?
It would be students that are targeted for special attention in the area of literacy. These are students right on the cusp of being at grade level, and we want to take them off that.
It's a special program for those in need,
Correct.
not across the board.
It targets all students. They don't have to have an IEP. It targets all students that are right on that cusp of reading literacy, which for us is always trying to get students to reading at grade 3. National studies support that reading at grade level of grade 3 sends a message. The next target gap is 6th grade, and you see a huge decline in the numbers of success.
But it won't be required for those who are okay.
Correct. We'll use varied assessments, report cards. We have 2 different assessments internally that we'll be using, and this would extend the day, so we're paying a stipend for someone to be able to provide that.
It's through grade 5.
Correct, through grade 5.
And so you're extending the day for up to 180 kids. How do they get home?
Yeah, well, that's going to be on parental responsibility. We have to have,
So there's no late bus or?
No, there's no late bus, and we have to have an understanding that I potentially am providing a student $1,000 worth of tutoring, that mom and dads have to step up. And I know that's a hard statement to make because we have very diverse population of people trying to pick up. We have champions available to them if they need to stay that one day for an extra half hour or an hour, including that Champions has been very supportive of us. But this has to be a family school effort. We can no longer, and any school system cannot just be about providing. It needs to be about the 2 sides providing together in order to be successful. And the studies are pretty clear. Yeah.
Have you done a poll as far as,
No, that would be the next level, would be to entertain those families. We know that there are families, because we've had families ask about how does my child get more services. And as you know, that typically deals with testing and then IEP process. This is this is an aggressive way, and I'd be willing to track the information. I'd have to bold out names of students and all that, but I'd be willing to show you information at the end of the year to see, was it worth $60,000 of support, or what were the glitches with the program in terms of most of our parents said thanks but no thanks because I can't pick up my child. So how did we resolve that? And then the last part is this year alone, we've had a number of ambulance runs to our schools. The social emotional issues of students continues to grow, even in Norton. We're a great school system. We do a lot of great things. But what we're seeing is students who have some significant issues that need our attention. Well, that starts with the adult. We need to train some of our staff further in how to deal with students who are having social emotional behavioral needs. These are students of all backgrounds. These are students that come from all walks of life who have all kinds of academic abilities, from the student who has an issue with schooling in terms of being scared of coming to school, or not, or the child who's a young child who has a difficulty with how to respond to sharing in the classroom. I myself haven't gone through restraint training in 10 years. I haven't gone through since my 10th year as a superintendent. I haven't gone through, so I walk into the buildings, as most of you know, pretty regularly. And if a student is really going into a total meltdown and we go through the process of how to get through a restraint, I haven't been trained in restraint. Neither have a number of our teachers. We need to move that up further, and that costs, specifically most of this comes out of substitutes covering for the teacher. We continue, by the way, to have an issue at the JCS with substitute coverage. So since I'm on air, If anyone is interested in subbing at the JCS or anywhere in our district, it's $80 a day. You need to pass a query and a fingerprinting, but please come forward, and we'd love to have you, because we continue to have issues with coverage. It's a safety issue for us. But this is all about trauma-sensitive schools, inclusive practices, and social-emotional professional development. That was not part of our budget. School committee members that are here tonight know that almost every week I send them an update, and I don't think I've had a week at the end of towards the end of last year and so far this year that I haven't mentioned that there was a social emotional behavioral learning with a student in a building where we had to call our fire department and police through Mike's office and the chief, Clark. Our offices are really calling for the fire department to come out because it's a social, emotional, mental health situation. It's not a child who needs to be, secured by a police officer. We want our children to see that officers are friendly to them and not there because of, they're going through a social, emotional, behavioral issue. In our day, I'm 49, that we would call these issues of mental health. And today they really are, except they're really revolved around the behavioral aspects of how students respond to a very simple request or one that requires more training than our staff has gone through. We've gone through a lot of training, but we're not fully there yet. So that's the request for that.
And are you trying to train everybody or just a select?
So we're gonna go. The easiest way for us to go is to go through select. In some instances, train the trainer models where we have teachers trained. Then we'll pull them out of class or out of their service delivery, and they'll train another group of 10 people. That's usually the model that we try to play into. It's more cost effective.
Walter?
Going back to the literacy program real quick, is there a model, a local town that's tried?
Yes, I've actually used this model in my last district. And the first year that I used it, it was not even close to this amount of money. And we had parents who, the busing was the issue. And it was a community with much more poverty and free and reduced lunch than we have. The changing factor to the second year when it became more effective was my letter simply said, congratulations, your child is getting $1,200 of free tutoring for the rest of this year. All you need to do is pick them up. I'll provide a snack for them, just pick them up. And we had 90% participation. That was the difference. And so the idea here is to really say, I'm giving you something, I need your part of this. And I know it's a headache, and you might have to carpool. Listen, if I'm in my office, they can sit in my conference room and do homework, because I've got plenty of days that I'm here until 5, 6 o'clock. But the idea is I want to help your child get there, because I know they can't. They're right there. They're on the cusp. They just need a little bit more help. There's a study out of Washington State that talks about how the only way students are going to improve their literacy is more time on task. So if they're getting 90 minutes of literacy every day, these kids might need another 90 minutes in order to get to their level. And to be quite honest, we don't need a federal document agreed to by family and the school department to say that your child needs help in literacy. We can do it without a federal document and provide that support.
And it's kind of going back to that. Is it going to be held in each of the 3 schools?
Yes. Yep.
Or
Yep.
so
No,
you're not
we're going to hold them.
provide a center?
Yeah, we're going to keep them. We're going to keep them with people. Our goal is to keep them with people that they know. We're not doing homework. We're targeting the assistance to the student. It's not a homework club. We're looking at student data and information that we have on that student about what they're not getting in terms of our internal testing. We use our STAR Early Literacy and STAR Literacy program. And it's an online computerized program that the kids take, and then every 6 to 8 weeks we can put them on that again and have them retest, 8 to 12 weeks, have them retest. If we progress monitor them, we can have them do them every 2 weeks. And that would be part of our goal with this is to really look at, I want to report back a year from now, hey, listen, this is what happened. This is the move that we said. We were able to take 35 more kids and move them in this direction.
About how many kids do you think would participate in this, or that you would ask to participate?
Yeah, we're probably going to be in the vicinity of 65 to 85 students in the first batch of students that we're really looking at students that are right on that cusp. And according to our data and information, we'll get our latest information in the next 2 weeks because the kids are just taking the test or completing the online assessment. That'll give us the first group of raw data. We'll compare it to last year's data, and those kids will climb to the top of being requested for services.
And if you get a kid, if you raise that literacy level, might that mean the difference between that student in the following year either being on an IEP or not being on an IEP?
Well, yeah. The answer to that is that we're trying to provide to parents, to students directly, what I would call preventative intervention services for students that are right on that cusp before going potentially down that road. I can't stop anybody from going on to an IEP. That's not my role as the superintendent. But I will tell you that the more services you're able to provide to certain populations of students, the less likely we have of those issues. Or we're able to provide better services to students who do go on an IEP because we have more information about them and what their real learning disability may be. Yep.
Is the amount for just covering the stipends, or the stipends and materials for?
Yeah, we'll use our materials that we have in-house. I mean, we might have to use a little bit of this, but this is predominantly at the rate that we pay for PD, which is just over $32 an hour.
Okay. And then for the 24,000 for the professional development, that's to like attend conferences?
So that will not go to attend, well, there might be a couple that we send for train the trainer, but this is all bringing in folks to support us in training, and then backfilling coverage for things like building substitutes. If needed. Sometimes some of these organizations only work with us if we have 15, 20 people. They won't do it if you have 5 people. It's not worth it to them. I'll leave on a positive note. We can't do this without your support, as you know, but more importantly, with all due respect to you folks, I want to thank the fire department and police department. The end of last year into this year has been crucial when it comes to us calling, as often as once or twice a day to help them support us. That takes away services, but this is what we're dealing with right now is making sure that they're safe. And we'll bring you an update in the spring about our bridge program at the high school, which we're actually thinking of adding to our middle school and then elementary school, which is for students that are hospitalized and making sure that their transition back is as clear and clean for them as possible. Yes, sir.
I appreciate all the handouts.
Sure.
And, one of the handouts, we were comparing and contrasting, which we always do with the other 3 towns. And it looks like they do not have school choice. And
No, none of those 3 communities
Yeah.
have school choice. I know that the Mansfield School Department last year voted no, but they did ask the superintendent for more information, and North Attleboro voted yes, but only for employees.
Yeah.
But we also know that this entire area, when it comes to the suburbs, is going to see declining enrollment.
Right, right.
So this has become the age of competition.
Yeah. No, and it's an important part of your budget. If you look at that page and you drive down.
It is, and for us, it's been, I don't know where we would be with areas of curriculum and technology if we didn't have school choice. You can like it, not like it, but when you're bringing in $519,000 and you're spending $327,000 and change that the school committee voted in June for the curriculum that we had to zero out, it is what it is. The other part of it is we always talk great about other communities and other private schools, public schools, the Vokes, the Aggies. I think my job is to sell Norton Public Schools to other communities as well. If people can choose to leave us, there might be other people who think that's best. Your superintendent's one of them.
Walter? Sorry, one
Thank
more.
you. Sure. Yep.
I was just reading about the backup in the store system. Is that situation as bad as this sounds?
It's bad. So last week, Paul's here on my network. Last week, we went 2.5 hours not knowing if we had lost our system. We had no email and so on. So it's bad. And it's gotten worse only because, as you remember a couple years ago, a year and a half ago, we had the financial threats where, they literally are taking your information and they're holding it from you and saying, if you give me 10 grand, I'll give it back to you and all that, which wasn't directly what happened to us, but happened to other local communities. We don't have that backup system. And if Paul doesn't have the backup, that one backup, which is actually going to be at the middle school and the high school, once that backup is done, he can go back. It's not the best way, but he can at least rebuild it back. If you don't have the backup, that means you don't have the data.
So this system will bring us up to the
Correct.
century of
Correct.
backup mechanism?
Yes. Yeah, we're not at the point yet. I know that a lot of people are thinking about the cloud, probably. We're not at the cloud yet when it comes to costs for schools, not even close. It's very, very expensive. We're not hearing about school systems going on the cloud for the purposes of that. It's just too expensive right now. The industry hasn't gotten to our level of what's considered expensive. I'll defer to Mike, too, because I know the town uses some of that, too. It can be expensive, and we have too much data.
Well, I was just going to ask, is there a way to kind of share that cost between the two sides and
Our
get a
systems,
better deal?
Our systems are so different of what we go for. That's the problem. Mike's dealing with public safety. I'm dealing with MCAS scores and students' information. It's just so different. We just had a discussion about other areas that both boards I think above Mike and I need to talk about, which is sharing other ways. We need another technician. We know that the town could probably use more than just Tuesdays and Thursdays for 4 hours. So how do we potentially, instead of I get a full-time 45,000 technician and Mike does, and now we're paying for 2 health insurance costs and vacation packages and all that, maybe we can go a couple of years by just sharing a person. I do it for 2 days a week, he gets it 3 days a week or something. And it's a lot less costly.
Just got one last question.
Sure.
These are all, they're good. How do you project it in the spring, as far as needs? And I know it's a loaded question, but I'm just,
My philosophy has always been, where are we and where do we want to go?
Yeah.
We have a strategic plan. We're about to rewrite it. I welcome any of you to partake on that. We'll be sending out. So what is our goal? We said full-day kindergarten was the goal. Like it or not, debate it and all that. The fact is we put it into a goal. We got it done. We wanted to update our curriculum. We did that as well, combination of both. In the first couple of years of operational budget, the last couple of years, it's actually more come out of choice funds. The one-to-one platform. We said we wanted to be a platform where our students were being as competitive as any other district. I was getting sick and tired of schools coming to visit the 8th grade and saying, look at us, we're one-to-one, and I couldn't say that. Now I can. And our kids are doing great work with it. So the next strategic plan will talk about those priorities. I will tell you that right now it's all about social, emotional, and behavioral programming and needs for students. That'll be at the forefront. If I had to tell you today what it would be. I'm very concerned about the fees to our families. I just think that we need to find a way to come together and do that. It's becoming more and more significant of an issue, especially as our free and reduced lunch population grows. It's going to continue to grow. It's not going to be comparable to a city, but it's going to continue to grow. And I think, so I have a concern there in terms of that. And then my biggest one is the one that you have in the personnel page. The turnover in staff this year at Norton High School is not good for the future of Norton High School. We were lucky because I told my administration, do not just hire somebody because they're cheaper. I said, I want you to find the best person who thinks that Norton is the right place for them and we think it's for them. So I didn't save any money in those hires because I lost people with 10 years of service, 11 years of service, 8 years of service, 9 years of service to the district. That means your culture can become significant. So that would be a third one. How do we keep people? And in my exit interviews with people, they all want to do better for themselves and their families, which I'm happy to support them with. But there is a lot of discussions about the long-term financial stability of cuts and personnel. It's on their minds. They have mortgages, they have college tuitions. We lost a teacher that in June that I was flabbergasted by. $10,000 raise, closer to home. The school system she's going to, she's not going to have to worry about that. And it's not our job per se to do that, but I do think we have to culturally be careful. Neither of us, I think, likes a lot of turnover in staffing over time, especially if you have good people, because it does cause you some headaches. And it costs you money, because you got to remember, we're spending $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 every year on new staff. So they get trained by us via your support, and then they go somewhere else.
Yep.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
What was that town you were in before?
I don't know. Did you know that town?
Mike?
So next week, we'll meet on the October 4th. Is that the Wednesday next week?
Yep.
And We'll bring forward the capital.
Third, Mike?
The third? Okay.
Third.
And we'll bring forward the capital plan and all the other town budget amendments for you to look at.
October 3rd, you live, right?
That's right, Peter. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What else?
As a matter of fact, I didn't ask him any questions because he gave me all the information.
All right,
He gave me the.
Don't have any.
guess we'll do just minutes.
That's what I asked
We don't
him the
have-
last time. Give me-
No, he's not, he's gonna do this next week.
Yeah, so,
So just do the minutes and
anybody else have anything?
old business, old.
Okay. Then I'll take a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great.